Welcome to Talking Giants presented by SeatGeek. I'm your host, Bobby Skinner, here with my co-host, Justin Pennick. Got a nice little podcast for you. We got our annual post-free agency, even though it's still in free agency, interview with Dan Duggan. Some good nuggets in there. Tony Award-winning Dan Duggan. Guy's an award-winning journalist. And we're going to talk about Matt Breida and Jihad Ward. Justin, how are you doing? And you had a very good, successful combine video that if people haven't watched, should watch.
Yes. Hi, Bobby Skinner. We released the first ever John Boy Media Scouting Combine today, so I'm kind of jazzed up about that. Seems like a lot of people are enjoying it. I'm very proud of it, so I hope you can go watch that. And the Giants are making some moves. Not really thrilling, exciting moves, but they're making them. And Dan Duggan, as always, is fantastic. So I'm feeling very, very good. How are you?
I'm doing well. A couple of signings. I'm really excited about this Matt Breida signing, which we'll talk about in a second. I'm really excited about that. The Dan Duggan interview was good. And draft month is coming up. We're basically, 2 weeks away from our first draft month episode. We'll have Nick Filato on the podcast next week. So I'm excited. I'm excited about all that. Before we get into this episode, and we might have a North Carolina announcement on Friday's pod.
Ooh.
Before we get into this episode was brought to you by three special peoples. Maybe they're not special. Maybe they're just kind of normal people. We got Matt Batista, who's going to do a Batista bomb on your ass.
Mm-hmm.
We've got Clay, but it's spelled Cleigh, which I've never seen Clay spelled that way.
I kind of like that.
And then Nathan Powell, who is Norman Powell, former Toronto Raptors brother. So he's supporting from Canada. Justin, who are these Canadians?
Disagree. All these people are special, and if you want to be special too, go to patreon.com/talkinggiants. $2 a month plus some other tiers. You get to hang out with us live while we record the shows, and you know the perks. You know what? I'm cutting it short there. You know the perks. Patreon.com/talkinggiants. Thank you to our wonderful special patrons.
All right, Justin, let's start with the Giants signing running back Matt Breida, who's 27 years old. I love this signing. I would assume he would be RB2 at this moment behind Saquon Barkley. And he does have injury issues, like he's battled with injuries throughout his career, but when he's healthy, and if he's a backup, he's not going to be getting a ton of carries. He's good, man. His best year was in 2018 with the 49ers, where he had 153 carries, 814 yards, and 5.3 yards per carry. And just from a statistical point of view, look at his yards per carry the last his career. 4.4, 5.3, 5.1, 4.3, which was his career low was 4.3 yards per carry behind a horrible offensive line in the Miami Dolphins, and then 4.8 yards per carry last year. Like, he's a productive, efficient back, and he can do things that most depth guys or fill-in spot starters can do with Matt Breida.
It's also not an exaggeration to say that Matt Breida is one of the fastest players in the NFL. It's not,
especially from the running back spot.
Yeah, and 2019, Matt Breida registered the fastest speed of any football player, with the top speed of, I believe, 22 miles an hour. Let's get it exactly here. 22.3 miles an hour. 2019, he had a long run against the Cleveland Browns where it was actually pretty funny. Waves goodbye to the defenders before he goes into the end zone because dudes can't catch him. So I was really, really on top of the Matt Breida hype train and some other fantasy football analysts that I like to follow. It's actually funny. We had Nick Ercolano on from BDGE on, I believe, heading into the 2020 season, and it was 2019 and 2020 where I was really on the Matt Breida train. And he's serviceable numbers for a backup, but we'll talk about some of the hesitations that I have because I was let down by Matt Breida. But for a backup, the receiving ability, the speed out of the backfield, and even the advanced numbers according to Next Gen 2018 and 2019, he had a positive rushing yards over expected in both seasons. He was 14th in rushing yards over expected in 2018, 22nd in 2019. And what that metric tells me is that, you can go to Bobby Skinner, say, Bobby, he was on the 49ers. That's why his yards per attempt were so high. Well, the rushing yards over expected metric separates offensive line play from the running back play. So Matt Breida, those advanced metrics are even good for him there too. Fast, explosive, fun.
Yeah, and it signals that the Giants are going to be one to run outside the tackles. They're going to try and implement some more wide zone. some toss plays. And the nice thing is he worked with Brian Dable last year, played under Brian Dable, so we know how Brian Dable wants to use him. He wants to use him outside the tackles, whether it's on outside zone or toss plays, which I never seen a guy get so many toss plays for the amount of carries that he got. And again, it's speed, and everything is set up off the speed, but he's got good vision too. Like, he sees cuts back really well. If there's a linebacker that's overflowing, he knows how to stutter and get that guy to hit the brakes a little bit, and then bam, like that quick burst. Like, he's got that. There's some guys who can run fast in a straight line. He's got that quick burst with the long speed. And then obviously he's going to be used as a receiving threat. They use him in the screen game a ton. Or he's used in the screen game a ton, and then obviously your normal running back routes. He's a lot of fun to watch, and he's not just he's fast. Like, this isn't the 7-year NFL project running back who everyone loved out of college, was so fast but hasn't put it together. Like, no, he's put it together. Like, his numbers are very well. He's an extremely efficient guy. So I just think he sets stuff up really well, and if he's your starter for a week, I don't think you should feel bad about your running back spot. And if he's your backup, it's like, okay, we could put a backup in who could come in and change the game in Matt Breida in just one play.
This is the most excited I've been for a backup running back since Shane Vereen. What was that, circa 2015? 2014?
Yeah, it was 2015, or maybe it might have came in 2014, but I know he was there in 2015.
Yeah, he was there. He was here for 2 years, and he signed a multi-year
deal. 2014 to 15.
Right, but there's no other backup running back that we've been more excited for, right? Like, Andre Brown, Orleans Darkwa were starter/backup guys. Rashad Jennings is a starter. 2018, it's Wayne Gallman who's drafted. We're definitely more excited about Matt Breida versus Wayne Gallman.
Yes, definitely.
More excited about Wayne Gallman versus I guess Devontae Booker was the next guy in line. Yes.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Not more excited than Alfred Morris, though, to be fair.
Oh, okay, true.
Alfred stand up.
Alfred Morris and Matt Breida shared the same backfield in 2018, I believe, with the 49ers.
That's true, man. You must be an Alfredite with all that information you got.
Well, I think I'm a Breidadite. That sounds weird.
You're a breeder.
I am a breeder. You were talking about the outside zone while, cutting it upfield, and just being efficient. A metric that I also like, another next-gen metric, is time behind the line of scrimmage. He has a very above average time behind the line of scrimmage, especially with his time in San Fran, which that is a very much an outside zone scheme. He didn't qualify for enough carries in 2019 and 2020 to be on the next gen site. So that actually kind of stinks because those are, lesser offensive lines. But still, when you consider that a lot of his carries are coming outside the tackles, I would still say that he is still efficient in terms of getting the football and then getting past that line of scrimmage, which, the Giants' offensive line probably won't be fully fixed this year. We're going to still need running backs that get the football and then get upfield or, are patient enough to get something out of a given play.
Well, it's speed with good vision and also burst and not dancing too much. When he's running between the tackles, there's a time where you're like, yeah, you maybe could have hit that a little harder. But also it's like, man, he can squeeze through some tight holes too. And it's like, okay, like most running backs, I'm not going through that hole, or I'm just going to push that pile right there. It's like, oh my gosh, he just burst through that to make it a 9-yard gain instead of a 3 or 4-yard gain. So again, this is the Giants are bargain bin hunting right now, but this is the one that I love. I love this bargain signing for Matt Breida. I really do.
So here's where I want to push back a little bit, because I fell victim to the Matt Breida hype train multiple times. Now, again, this is a really, really big nitpick, because this is a guy that we signed for 1 year. He is not being paid a lot of money, and we are super excited for him. All of those things still stand. But where I find the hesitation is that Matt Breida should be getting more carries in the National Football League, and especially I know he gets hurt, but in a backfield in 2019 where the San Francisco 49ers had all those running backs go down. I know Jerick McKinnon was one of them that went down. He still had trouble finding, being the sole starter in that backfield. Myles Gaskin in 2020 with the Dolphins got more carries than he did. In 2021, Matt Breida was third on the depth chart behind Singletary and Zach Moss, which honestly, I find Breda to be an extremely exciting running back, and I get more excited about him than Moss or Singletary. My point is, it's not just one coaching staff, it's 3 coaching staffs that has had this guy kind of lower on the depth chart. So I would like to think that that happens for a reason. Maybe if it was one coaching staff, it would be like, oh, sometimes coaching staffs are stupid, and fans sometimes are right when they're putting their fist on the table for guys to get playing time, which I do think all 3 fan bases, at least 49ers and Buffalo, those fan bases wanted to see Matt Breida get more carries. And it just hasn't happened yet. So that's the caveat.
We're also, Saquon Barkley is still on this team. Saquon Barkley will still be getting the majority of the carries. So I just want him to be, if he puts up 4.4, 5.3, 5.1, 4.3, or 4.8 yards per carry as a backup running back, I'll be happy.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about getting Matt Breida a ton of carries. I just want whenever he does get carries to be efficient and be able to stretch defenses, horizontally.
Yeah.
And that sets up for not just play action, but better types of play action plays that lead to big plays. Okay, because when linebackers are reading their keys versus a play action up the middle, it's a lot different than when they're reading their keys on a play action outside zone and they're flowing. Okay, because now you got guys coming the opposite way of one way that the other defenders are going, and it's why teams like San Fran and those wide zone teams can get so much play action out of those outside zone plays. And he's used as a receiving threat too. I
just had to mention that as somebody who has gotten my heart broken by Matt Breida fantasy-wise. I had to mention that. But very, very excited, and I totally agree about all those things, that Matt Breida can bring those things to the table.
The next player the Giants signed before we get into the Dan Duggan interview, Jihad Ward, 27 years old, 6'5", 287 pounds. Spent the last year with the Jags, where he had 32 tackles, 2 sacks, 3 tackles for a loss on about 50% of the snaps or so. In 2020, was with Wink Martindale and the Ravens. Obviously, that's where the connection comes from. In 10 games, he had 16 tackles, 3 sacks, 4 tackles for a loss. To be honest, I understand this, and Lorenzo Carter is gone. I've tried to find the Lorenzo Carter contract details, couldn't find them. But, if you listen to our Edge review, I was very okay with moving on from Lorenzo Carter and just letting guys like Quincy Roche or, the fill in the gap, Jihad Ward players come in and play that spot and be able to do what he was able to do at a cheaper number. And I don't know what Lorenzo Carter got. But I will say with Jihad Ward, kind of left me a little underwhelmed play-wise. I remember his name coming out of the draft. He's not going to test the corner at the edge. Like, he is an outside linebacker, defensive end. He's not going to test the offensive tackles. Like, if he's just going one-on-one with offensive tackles, he very rarely wins. But where I do see him getting production, Justin, and I saw this on film, was with the Jags and the Ravens, is he is an outside linebacker, but we know Wink Martindale likes to run more than 2 outside linebackers on the field at one time. Is on pass rush downs, you line him up inside, that's where Jihad Ward's production is going to come from. So that's where, if you see Jihad Ward being a successful New York Giant, I think that's where it's going to be. When it's Azeez Ojulari and Kayvon Thibodeau on the edges on 2nd and 12 and Jihad Ward is lining up over the guard, he can make a guard look silly. But when he's just going one-on-one versus a tackle, he just doesn't win. He doesn't have those wins. He doesn't have the get off the line of scrimmage. And he doesn't just have like that long speed and that ability to bend corners. Like, he got shut down. I mean, I was watching him versus Cam Fleming, and Cam Fleming was handling him pretty well. But so that's where I think he can get success with the Giants, Justin. But I'm going to say I don't think he's a guarantee to make the 53-man roster. Like, I don't, because we would imagine they add an edge at the top of the draft, or maybe round 1, round 2, round 3. So that's a guaranteed roster spot. Azeez Ojulari. I think I would take Quincy Roche over him, and that's 3. So right now he's that 4th guy. So I think he's going to have to battle for a roster spot, is what I'm saying. I think if the camp ended today, I would have him on there, and I'd have the Giants keeping 5 edges with Ellerson Smith and whoever they draft. But I do think it will be a battle. Like, he's not walking in the camp with a job earned, I don't believe.
Yeah, for a guy that's signed in, how many days are we into free agency in the new league year? 2020 with Wake Martindale had 3 sacks, 8 QB hits on 40% of the snaps. So I've always found he has some sneaky QB hit production in there. But when that's kind of the best thing you're saying about somebody, it's not, fantastic. He was traded from the Colts to the Ravens in 2019, and then 2020 he spent the full season with Wink Martindale in 10 games. And one of the things that I looked at immediately, Bobby, was where did he line up in those 10 games and 40% of the snaps in 2020? Where did he line up? What are his snaps by position look like? So here's what they look like with Baltimore and Wink Martindale. Interior defensive line. Now, this doesn't mean that he has his hand in the dirt, but that's what you talked about being that stand-up A-gap blitzer.
Well, I think he's better with his hand in the dirt, to be honest.
Oh, really?
Because he has when he's standing up, he doesn't get off the ball well. When he's got his hand in the dirt, that's when he can get good get-off. So that's where I want to see him, is on those specialized packages that Wink Martindale likes to run.
Hey, you want to know what? Because he's 287 pounds. So the first thing that came to my brain is this another Ofedi Adenabo, where this guy's like an outside linebacker, but he really should be a defensive end in a 3-4 system? So that's interesting to hear you say that. So 54 snaps, lining up at the interior defensive line, whether his hand is in the ground or he's standing up as that A-gap blitzer. Left end, 14 snaps. Right end, 8 snaps. So that tells me you're not really a 3-4 defensive end. Left outside linebacker, 82 snaps. Right outside linebacker, 86. So he's basically either lining up as an outside linebacker, or he's in the A-gap, either with his hand in the dirt, or he's a stand-up blitzer.
Yeah, and the Jags did something similar where they didn't have lining up in the A-gap, but they had him lining up between the guard and the tackle, or just flat out on the edge. With his best production. In fact, I posted a couple clips for one versus Mark Lewinsky and one versus Quentin Nelson. Was, they have Josh Allen and who's the other pass rusher they have? Chason, I guess. And they have those guys on the edge, and then Jihad Ward at the 3 technique over the guard. And that's where he was able to work, because he has decent lateral ability to get outside in, but he doesn't have that ability to do that versus tackle. So, I think he does make the roster. But if you see him playing on Sundays, his best plays will come from the inside and not from the edge. He can hold his own versus the run on the outside versus the edge, but he's just not a difference maker if you're just talking about just edge for edge, Lorenzo Carter's a better player than him.
He's just a big dude. Here's a player comp. DeMarvin Leal. Am I getting his name right, from Texas A&M?
Yeah, that's fair. I think people have a little more hope for DeMarvin Leal right now because he's going into the draft. But yeah, I would say similar type player. I actually think that is a good comp.
There you go.
How about
because
that?
I was looking at him this past weekend, and huge, he's 280, 290 pounds too. And he was an edge rusher for Texas A&M, and a lot of people are saying that how very definitely too slow, not enough burst to be coming off the edge, but do you have enough strength to be an interior defensive lineman? So he's kind of stuck in the middle there. So there you go. There's a player comp.
Bam. That's actually a good player comp. How about that? So when we're talking about DeMarvin Leal during the draft, I see him as Jihad Ward. I've realized the only player comps I'm good at are the ones that remind me of Giants players, because those are the players I watch in and out every snap. It's I don't watch Stephon Diggs in and out every snap to comp anyone to Stephon Diggs. Even though early talking Giants, I comped Terry McLaurin to Stephon Diggs. How about that? And that actually worked out as a pretty good comp.
There you go. Good for you.
Yeah, I was a big Terry McLaurin guy. Now, again, was our draft coverage as in-depth in 2019? No, it wasn't. But I was right about the Terry McLaurin hype. I will give myself credit for that. But I won't bring up that I thought Tevin Coney was going to be a good linebacker. I won't bring that up.
Don't bring it up.
The Giants also signed Jameel Douglas, who was with the Bills last year on the practice squad. He only played 2 reps. This is a camp. If someone gets injured in camp, Jameel Douglas, he's been in the league for 7 years. He's not a starter. He is a backup. But he has played NFL snaps. I'll be honest, I didn't watch the film on him. But that's Jameel.
That's Jameel.
All right, Justin, do you want to kick it to the interview?
Let's kick it to Dan Duggan.
College basketball fans, join the action on the court during the biggest tournament of the year with DraftKings Sportsbook. Turn your team's victory into your own big win. New customers can bet $5 on any team to win and get $200 in free bets if they do. It's that simple. If they win, you win. I've actually been having a lot of fun, partly because I'm doing pretty well in this bracket. Like, I thought, so every year as you get older, the sports that you aren't as diehard of, you get less and less of a fan of it each year, Justin. And college basketball was kind of that for me. Whereas like this year, it's like I didn't watch a second of college basketball this season. Like not a second. And when I did my bracket, I did a little bit of research, but I was like, you know what, I'm gonna pick some 1 seeds to get into the Final Four. And I picked St.
Peter's.
I did pick St. Peter's. That is true. And I picked them before the other game too. I've been watching every single game. Like I've been watching the last 5 minutes of every single game. This tournament has been awesome. Like I'm back in on the tournament, and the Talking Giants tournament group has been fun to keep track of. If Sportsbook isn't available in your state yet, bet on it. That'll get you excited. You can still join the college hoops actions with DraftKings pools. Everyone can play free pools all March long for a shot at a share of $250,000 in prizes. Simply join a pool and answer questions like who will make it to the next round and who will hit the most three-pointers, then check the results. Miami looks good, baby. I feel it. I smell a championship in the air for Miami. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code JOHNBOY. Bet $5 on any college hoops team to win and get $200 in free bets if they do. If they win, you win with promo code JOHNBOY this week at DraftKings Sportsbook. 21 plus. Restrictions apply. See show notes for details. Now, it's Tony award-winning journalist Dan Duggan. All right, we now welcome back onto the show. We do this every year after free agency of The Athletic. And more importantly, an award-winning journalist of the, not sure if you're a good person, but Best Giants reporter presented by Kadarius Toney Award, presented by Talking Giants Award. Dan Duggan, how are you feeling ever since the award? I feel like it's kind of, boosted your name in the streets a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, still haven't come down from that high. I mean, I'm getting my shelving all, I got to get it reconfigured to make room for that award. That's why I don't have it behind me, but trust me, it'll be there eventually.
I mean, I don't know if you'll ever wear the t-shirt that says media some clowns, the $20 Dunkin' gift card. What's your wife's reaction when that stuff starts coming in the mail? Like, what is all this?
Definitely confusion. I would say that's the biggest one. Yeah, the shirt, I haven't found the appropriate time to wear it, actually. It's funny. I was thinking I should have brought it to the Senior Bowl because I didn't realize you guys were going to be down there. And I never even got to hook up with you guys. I literally could tell when we were tweeting where you were at. I was like, I'll go over and say hi to those guys. And then the Brian Flores lawsuit dropped. So that kind of changed plans. And the next day it was raining. So I never even got in touch with you guys. But that would have been probably the setting to wear it. So I don't know. I got to find the right time to break that out.
Yeah, Senior Bowl standout, Kadarius Toney, too. Now you can't win it for 2 years. I mean, we copied it from the Good Guy Award. Essentially, we created our own self-serving award to people who are nice. So, do you have any tips for the next group of candidates or an endorsement? Like, put your weight behind somebody.
I'm certainly not going to endorse any of these guys. I mean, I think you should probably just vacate the award for a year and then let me get back in the running. No, listen, I don't know. I've been with you guys from early on when I was like, who the hell are these guys hitting me up? And then all of a sudden, I was like, oh, maybe because they're kind of legit. So I think that's the key. You gotta bend there. You can't just jump in on this Talking Giants train now. You have to bend there from early on.
I remember. Yeah. Simple Man Radio's it's viewed many different iterations, and we're still trying to screw around with it a little bit. But I remember having you on, and you had a picture where you got like a cut under your eye playing basketball or something, and I was like, here's the episode, and you're like, can you not use that picture of me with my eye cut? And so
I'm sure you used it, right?
Yeah, but here we are, and that was the beginning of the Dave Gettleman era. The Dave Gettleman's era is over. Joe Shane era has begun. Just generally, have you ever had like a draft or like going into this draft, and even they've filled some little bit of needs in free agency where it feels like they have so many holes and not just as depth but as starters, and it's like we keep on hearing like, oh, you can get this guy in the draft, get this guy in the draft, but it's like they almost might go into the draft with more holes than needs or more needs than picks, and they have 9 of them.
No, I agree. It's funny. I was talking to some people the other day about this. I think this might be like at this point in time, the worst roster in my time. And that's fine. I want to put that up front because everyone's very defensive. I'm like, this is what it kind of should be. Like, this is what they should have done in 2018, the kind of tear down rebuild, not just a little, buff it up and try and remodel it on the fly. But when you do look at the roster right now, I mean, it is, like you said, there's huge holes everywhere. And then you're only making more with some of these cap related moves. Like, I mean, Logan Ryan, maybe we'll get into that. That wasn't even cap related. But then obviously the James Bradberry shoe is going to drop. So when you look at what this roster is going to look like on draft day, and of course, hey, you can nail the draft and we'll look back and say that was the start of the turnaround. But if you just look at the NFL players on this roster right now, I mean, it's scary thin. So I think this is probably as bad as it's been, but it's very easy to look back a year ago. Like, oh man, they filled this big hole at receiver, this big hole at corner, this big hole at tight end, which I never really bought that one, but you can fool yourself into thinking that, and we saw what happened. So I don't think it's the worst thing that they're not just spending, and not that they could, but going crazy trying to figure out ways to patch holes right now. It's going to be a process. This year is not going to probably be a great year, but you're hoping they're laying a foundation for like the long term.
And we're waiting for the next domino to fall. And we've been waiting for this guy for the last couple of weeks, and that's going to be James Bradberry. So what's his status? We're all kind of sitting here before the start of the new league year. Is something going to happen? No. What's his status right now? What is the plan with James Bradberry, at least maybe in your opinion, or what you would do? You have a pretty good understanding of, the cap and the implications and things like that deadline. So what's the status of James Bradberry? What's next?
So the description I've used, and it's kind of cliche, but it applies perfectly. It's just a game of chicken. Like Joe Schoen, everyone knows he kind of made a rookie mistake, in my opinion, announcing how much money he wanted to clear. But I mean, it would have become apparent anyways. But once he wasn't going to restructure Leonard Williams, he wasn't going to restructure Kenny Galladay, all those types of things. You knew he was probably going to move James Bradberry, but he came right out like the day after he got hired and told Peter King that number. So if you're a GM at another franchise, you're like, you can just keep a tally on your whiteboard. It's not that hard of math to tally it up. And I think they're at like 25. So obviously James Bradberry would be that extra 12 and basically get you to the 40. But he held firm because they definitely had the option where you could have cut him, just cut your losses and say, listen, people are playing hardball with us. It stinks. He's worth something, but we just want to get the money and operate, with a little bit of wiggle room. And he didn't blink. Then, that 4 p.m. deadline for the new league year was sort of a soft deadline. But still, now if they cut him now, they're eating $2 million this year, and we can get into they can get it back in 2023, but that's a little convoluted. But bottom line is, that was a point where you said, okay, is he going to just bite the bullet and say, listen, we can't trade him, I'm going to cut him? He didn't do that. And now, obviously, when you hear reports that, they'll keep him all the way up to week 1, he needs that word out there. So, I mean, because other teams are like, maybe they will. They know the reality. I mean, their draft class is basically dollar for dollar what they get in James Bradberry's cap savings, and you see how tight they are right now. There's no way they can get to training camp with Bradberry's cap hit on the ledger unless they do something drastic like restructure Leonard Williams or something crazy like that. So I think that's the real deadline is the draft. I still think something's going to happen sooner than later. I mean, they're restructuring Graham Gano to basically afford like Matt Breida and Jihad Ward signing. So they're really tight right now. I think just giving themselves a little breathing room. I mean, still they're going to need that $12 million basically for the draft class, but you want to have maybe a little flexibility if someone's available for like $2 or $3 million. They really can't even do that right now. So I still think sooner than later, but I will say, Shane's proven to be a poker player. He didn't just fold at the first sign of, things not going his way. I think he has to bite the bullet and realize the value is not, what it should be for a player of Bradberry's caliber. It might end up being like a 6th round pick or one of those Amari Cooper where you trade a 6th for a 5th. So it's something, a really marginal upside, but it's just kind of the reality that they're in.
Does it seem like they have offers because, there was, or is there like they're holding out for a better offer? They've been offered a 6th and it's like, no, we're not going anything lower than a 4th. We'd rather cut them than give them up for a 6th type thing.
No, I don't know for a fact. I don't think so. I think they're at the point now where like, hey, if a 6th is the best you're getting at this point because there's still a lot of corners out there. Teams have kind of moved on. I don't think you hold them. Your leverage doesn't really get better. I know I see people say like, if a team strikes out in the draft, like at that point, the team might say, this is our roster for this year and we'll just, kind of get by with what we have. So you're really playing a game of chicken. I don't think they have offers. I think they have inquiries, which is like some of these fun semantics wordplay we do at this time of year. Teams are interested in. If he gets cut, he'll sign. I mean, maybe not as fast as Logan Ryan, but he'll sign quickly, and it'll probably be north of $10 million a year. But teams are looking at it like, do I want to give up draft capital to take this 1-year salary for $13 million, which that's a big cap hit, and James Bradberry's a good player. He's probably not worth that. All right, so now we're going to have to extend him. So why am I giving anything up when you're going to have to cut this guy? I can just bid, and if I don't get him, it's not the end of the world. I mean, teams want him, but he's not, like, oh my goodness, we're going to have to, tear up our cap for the future to get James Bradberry. I think there's a couple of teams that are definitely interested, and he'll have no problem finding a market, but I don't think the Giants have like 3 different offers, and they're leveraging him. I think if they get a reasonable offer, they'll take it, kind of clean their hands of him and just get that $12 million in cap space.
No, it's kind of crazy not to totally get into him because we've talked about him a lot so far this offseason. But, you could replace the name Saquon Barkley with James Bradberry in your explanation, and it kind of makes the same exact sense. But Logan Ryan, that's somebody who you've been on talking about and just putting out there in your writing, but you haven't been like, this still doesn't make sense even when I'm hearing this. So I want to hear your timeline. Walk us through your timeline of what you heard out of either it's pre-combine, during combine about Logan Ryan, and then ultimately how it went down, and why is it beneficial for the Giants to do this year, or does it just totally not make sense?
Yeah, well, I'll give a shout out to a Tony Award favorite for next year, I'm sure, and based on what I've seen on social media, Pat Leonard. He's the one who put it out there first in like early February, mid-February, and I read his stories. This doesn't make sense, but obviously he had said he was, heard that from people in the front office. So I just kind of was operating as if it wasn't a realistic thing. I saw that, took note of it. But then I was in Indianapolis and I was talking to somebody who A, would have no reason to like mislead me, and B, like was like, yeah, they don't want him, like they want to cut him, they want to move on. And this person, again, like I was still skeptical, even though I really had no reason to. And now I know going forward to listen to this person. I was like, it just still doesn't make sense, because you just do the basic math and you look at like you're saving $775K this year, but you're eating $11.5 million. And whatever you think of Logan Ryan's play, I mean, he played like 100% of the snaps. That's leaving a huge void. I mean, as we all know, the only safeties on the roster right now are Xavier McKinney and Julian Love. So it's kind of like, wow, you're going to just like make a huge hole like that because you might not think he's a perfect fit. But I just kind of kept hearing it. So yeah, every time I'd write one of those stories about like moves to watch out for, I was just like, whispers, but it doesn't make sense. So then it got really confusing too with, he had a trigger in his contract on Friday, which I'm kicking myself for not like kind of honing in on more, that yes, of course they had to do it before then, because at that point, $3 million more of his contract would have got, or his salary would have got guaranteed. They would have like lost cap space to cut him this year. So they had to, if they're going to do anything, it had to be by then. So I wish my antenna was up a little more. So I don't know still the machinations behind the scenes. I don't think it was a surprise to Logan Ryan, again, especially when he lands in Tampa pretty much immediately. I think, the sides probably knew this was coming. I don't know that they tried to work out a pay cut or anything like that. It does seem like they just kind of wanted to move on. I mean, I'm basically just having to connect dots. It's a new regime. I don't have as many connections with the coaching staff and so on at this point, but it just feels like, and it makes sense. I know other people have kind of come to the same conclusion. He was a big presence in a good way. If you're Joe Judge and Pat Graham, like he was the embodiment of what they wanted on the field, in the locker room. He was like the face of sort of their regime. So if you're a new regime coming in, like that can kind of be a double-edged sword. Like, I don't know if I want the old regime's guy having a big voice in the locker room, a lot of young defensive backs, influential guy. Like, and I'm not saying Logan Ryan's a bad guy at all, but it's just he's not our guy. And as you can see how the moves they've made, our guy is sort of a defining characteristic of most NFL front offices. They bring a new regime in, they want to get their John Feliciano, they want to get their leaders in and kind of push the other ones out. So I think it's as simple as that. You can say he didn't fit in Wink schemes. Like I don't know. I mean, I think he fit better than whoever the third safety is going to be this year.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be it would have been a perfect Wink scheme, but he's a guy who's played corner, safety in the like. To me, I know he's not the same player he may have been a year ago or 2 years ago, but like a guy who's versatile. Like I feel like that fits perfectly with Wink. And again, I know he's not as good as he once was, but like you said, he's not going to be better than what they brought in. They're not saving any cap space. I'm still kind of dumbfounded by it, to where at first I was like, I'm not believing this whole like, oh, Joe Judge connection crap, but it's like it's kind of the only thing that makes sense, because like you said, like maybe they're trying to I don't know, but it's
the best I got. I mean,
to wrap your head around.
To put the cap thing, to put a ball on the cap thing. So like they saved $775K this year, which is really negligible, because as soon as they sign somebody, it'll cancel that out.
10,000 or something.
Yeah, but it's like $3 million is off the books next year because he's totally off the books. If you let him play out this whole season and then cut him next off season, you're left with $3 million dead money. But that's totally insignificant amounts. I mean, it had to be more about not wanting the person and the player than anything cap related, because again, $3 million is a rounding error when you consider how much space they're going to have next year. $3 million this year would be kind of a big deal, but there should be fine cap wise next year. That $3 million shouldn't have factored heavily into that decision.
Yeah, if they like moved off, if they were just like clear, like moving off of guys like Shep, but like they don't need $3 million next year. They need players to like. I ranted on Friday. I was like, you still got to play 17 games next year and be competent. Like that does matter for this coaching staff. Maybe it's not the front, but the coaching staff wants to have some type of competency out there, because look at. You can be promised a long-term plan, but look what happened to Pat Shurmur after, having no players on defense with Fletcher.
it's always that fine line they walk. And Gettleman, talked about it too, where it's easy for us to tear it down and build for the future. But like you said, you got to fill the stadium for 9 home games. You got to like put a product on the field for 17 games. But that's why it's a fine line, because Logan Ryan not being on the roster doesn't make the 2022 Giants better. James Bradberry not being on the roster doesn't make the 22 Giants better. So if we're all looking for the future, then yeah, just unload Saquon for a 7, just cut Shepard, cut Martinez, all these guys. But like, it's a balancing act. You try to say, can we get the best players that sort of fit and we're going to be competitive, but doesn't really hinder us in the future? And it's like, so not every move is going to line up perfectly with like one strict vision. Like we're only focused on the future, or, we're trying to win this year. It's a delicate act. And certainly Gettleman didn't master it. So we'll see how Shane does with it.
Yeah, I mean, every single move so far has been, even if you don't fully agree with it, like I'm not as big on paying a backup quarterback, but it's like I understand why they value it. The Ryan ones was like, man, they must have just like hated this dude, because there's just no like logical explanation for this.
And Dable was in New England with him for 4 years. I mean, he's on the other side of the ball, but he definitely would know him. So again, it's not like they're just flying blind. So I mean, again, I would like to eventually get to the bottom of it. Again, I'm sort of just informed speculation at this point, or just kind of connecting dots. But yeah, it's hard to come to any other conclusion because nothing else makes sense on the surface.
Yeah, well, Logan Ryan did it for the team. Do you got anything on Tyrod Taylor, Justin?
Yeah. So one of the things that I was reading from you after Tyrod Taylor was signed, and it makes sense when you look at the contract breakdown, I'm sure that's what you were looking at. Tyrod Taylor signing him means more for almost 2023 versus 2022. So I want to get your thoughts on Tyrod Taylor, how that contract breaks down. Hey, this is definitely not an investment in definitely not a referendum on Daniel Jones being here post 2022. So give me some Tyrod Taylor thoughts, and what do you got?
Yeah, well, so I think when you first saw those numbers, and I put my hand up, I kind of ate the trash on Schefter putting out the first number of like 2 years, 17 million. Like, whoa, that's like $8.5 million a year. That's a good chunk of change. And like I understand those initial numbers are usually inflated, but when the deal's that small, like, come on, can you throw in an up to, or worth a maximum of, like, so when you find out it was 2 for 11, a lot more reasonable. And they obviously got funky with that in the void year. Like, they're really just trying to squeeze this on for as little as possible this year. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I think it jumps to like 7 and change next year. So that's that's a decent cap hit. Still, if he's your starting quarterback, that's cheap. But for a backup, that's a decent chunk of change. But the way I looked at it is, like, I think people, especially people who aren't Daniel Jones guys, oh, this is it. He's out. They're signing Tyrod to, like, have a camp competition. I don't see it that way at all. Like, I mean, Tyrod Taylor, like, I don't know why people would think he's better than Daniel Jones. It's been a while since he's even been a mildly effective starting quarterback in the league. So I think he's definitely, obviously, a much better backup than they've had. And Daniel Jones stinks, or if he gets hurt, then sure, you can see Taylor. But I don't think they're going into camp and, alternating reps 1 in, 1 out. I mean, I think it's going to be Jones's job to lose by, he'd have to really, mess up to lose it before the opener. But what I looked at it was the way they structured that deal. It feels like they're really setting it up for 2023, whereas they're not going to exercise Daniel Jones's option. That would shock me at this point if they do that. There's no justifiable reason to do so. So if he stinks this year and you just want to cut ties with him, you already have your bridge quarterback for 2023. You don't have to like mess around next year and try and find somebody. You kind of wash your hands with Daniel Jones. You say, worst case scenario, Taylor's our starter this year. Hopefully you get a quarterback in next year's draft. But even worst case scenario, if you have to put it off to 2024 for whatever reason, you have him to get you through next season. Wouldn't be ideal, but that's the way I looked at that signing, because the 2-year part, there's a little bit of a commitment there where a lot of these guys sign 1 year, kind of stopover deals. But I think the fact that they went 2 years with him, put a bigger cap hit next year, wouldn't really make sense cap-wise to cut him. Maybe he's the backup. If Daniel Jones is absolutely awesome, becomes a franchise quarterback, and they give him a huge deal, then Tyrod's just a high-paid backup maybe. But I looked at it as nothing really to do with Daniel Jones 2022, but a big-time hedge against Daniel Jones in 2023.
You mentioned the 5th-year option on Daniel Jones. Like you said, there's really no reason to pick it up unless they just if they walked in and were like, no, we fully love this kid the way the last regime did. A different one though is Dexter Lawrence. And originally I was against it, and then you see someone like BJ Hill getting $10 million a year, Austin Johnson getting $7 million a year. That decision's coming up. Do you kind of have a sense of what they're going to do and what you think they should do?
I don't have a sense really, because even in the limited times we've talked to Shane, it's, mostly been focused on, Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley, James Bradberry. We haven't kind of worked their way down. And, the Lawrence decision isn't really top of mind because we think 5th-year option. You're obviously thinking Jones. But, when I looked at that figure, I know he hasn't been great. And you have to make a decision. Like if you're going to keep Leonard Williams, you're going to have 2 guys on your cap next year, $37 million on your defensive line. That's not ideal. But I look at it as, again, the option is sort of a placeholder. Like you mentioned some of the guys who were in his class. At the time I made the, I think my 10-step plan, I said they should exercise it. I was looking at Dalvin Tomlinson, another homegrown guy who was a pretty good player, got like $10 million a year. So that's what the option is. So I felt like if you're just making comparisons, that's kind of the cost of doing business. And it's only been really strengthening to see what BJ Hill got, which I think that's a little much, but hey, that's just what it's going to cost.
I think people might forget Cincinnati's a bad franchise, and they're kind of making some bad franchise moves right now, but they still got Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I like what they do with the offensive line, but I'm not sure that BJ Hill is where I'd be like sinking a significant amount of money into. But no, I think what I come to is at some point you have to re-sign your own players. I know that they're clearly, kind of clearing house here with the old regime, but it's like, don't repeat the same mistakes of like, Devon Kennard's got to go, Romeo Quara's got to go, like Justin Pugh. I'm not saying they should re-sign all of those guys. I'm just saying like there are some still decent players here. You don't want to like start from 0 to 53. If you can keep some guys, Dexter Lawrence is a good guy, pretty good player. And the ideal point with the 5th year option is, okay, you pick it up. Now you have a whole year to work out an extension. And if you don't, all right, then he plays on it. But like, that's what the goal should be, is start locking these guys up not as early as possible, but on the earlier side. So you get a discount. That's what the Eagles do probably better than anybody. A lot of these times they sign these guys like, what they're paying, the Goddard this much or Mariota that much. And then after a year, you're like, oh, that's actually a pretty good deal. And they get the guys locked up on kind of team friendly deals. So I think that's kind of the ideal way to operate. And the Giants have not done that. They've always just like been like, okay, what's the deadline? Oh, we have to make a decision, and then Landon Collins leaves in free agency or, that type of thing. So I think being a little proactive would be a good step forward. And I think like Lawrence, yeah, maybe you don't love paying him $10 million next year, but maybe that just buys you some time to, work out a kind of extension that works for both sides. You can keep him here for 3-4 years and have sort of a core guy that you don't have to worry about going forward.
Yeah, not being proactive on Leonard Williams certainly came back to bite them in the ass. That's the example.
Yeah, that's a better example than Landon Collins. Yeah,
we were talking about holes on the roster and how many needs the Giants have, and the way that you can address needs is by having depth. Now, one of the spots that Bobby and I don't like to have a lot of quote unquote depth on is a quarterback. And you were talking and you were writing about how there may be 3 quarterbacks on the roster this year because Davis Webb may not be willing to stay on the practice squad. Talk to us a little bit about that and what was in front of Davis Webb, because I think there was a little bit of a correction that we all had since Davis Webb was signed.
Yeah, also, what was the what did you think was the likelihood you'd be covering Davis Webb this long?
I know. I wish I had stayed
long
into
the future.
Yeah, I did not see that come. Imagine if he comes back and like is the starter somehow after 5 years later. That should be like anointed as Eli's successor. Yeah, so I'll peel back the curtain here. So I was talking to somebody at the Senior Bowl out at night, and a lot of these conversations you have are kind of like deep into the night at these events. And so someone told me that Davis Webb had the option of being, like at the end of the day, it was the Bills quarterbacks coach. But so I obviously was like, oh, that's interesting. And then 2 days later, I went to write it. I'm like, they must have said assistant quarterbacks coach. Like, how is this guy who's like basically never played in the NFL going to get like the position coaching job for Josh Allen? I should have just double checked. I was like, yeah, I must have been assistant. Like, I don't know, whatever. So I wrote that. And then I kind of heard from a few people, like, I think that was actually the quarterback coach job. So I was like, oh, man. So let me check in on this. And sure enough, it was. He would have been, the Joe Brady job, who obviously that's a pretty big name. They were willing to give that position to Davis Webb. And to me, that changes the dynamics in one big way. Because, A, we can definitely debate sort of the merits of like being the third quarterback or being the position coach. But what it changes the dynamics to me is money-wise. Because if he was the assistant quarterbacks coach, I don't know, the salaries are kind of a mystery. But let's say it's $100,000. So just being on the 53, it's like $800,000. So that's a big difference. But if you're gonna be the quarterbacks coach, let's say that's $400,000. Like now it's a little tougher decision just financially. So it wasn't just an easy decision to keep playing. And I think the obvious thing is you need the quarterbacks coach for Josh Allen right now. I mean, that's a rocket ship that's like taken off. If Ken Dorsey could be a head coach in 2 years, then you become the OC. You could be the next Sean McVay. I mean, playing this out. And I'm sure he did play this out. I mean, he obviously wants to be a coach. But I think he also looked at it like, I think he's 27. I mean, like the dream of playing is every kid grows up dreaming to play, not coach. He's really never gotten a shot. I mean, obviously I don't think it's going to come here either, but he gets to still be a part of the team. We saw Alex Tanney had a nice run of kind of this Davis Webb coach/player role. So I think at the end of the day, he looked at like, I still got a shot to keep playing. Coaching's not going anywhere. Now you might not walk into as good a situation as he would have walked into as a 27-year-old first-time position coach, having arguably the best quarterback in the league. But he has a really tight relationship with Dable. So my understanding, and this is more of a wink nod thing from, I don't, there's no way it's written into his contract and maybe things can change. I think he's going to be on the 53. I don't think Dable would have kind of taken him here knowing what he left behind in Buffalo and then like stick him on the practice squad where he's going to make $200,000, actually making less than he would have as the quarterback's coach. I have to think there's like a friendly agreement because Dable really values him. I think he's, kind of what we all joke about, like good in the room. I think that really applies to him. He's basically going to be another position coach in there with Shea Tierney. So I would assume he'll be on the 53 all season, obviously inactive on game days, but I think that's just sort of part of the cost of doing business where like, we're going to make sure we don't screw this kid after we basically told him to pass on like the opportunity of a lifetime coaching wise. So I think they'll carry him on the 53. And there was a chance where I was like, maybe they're just going to keep him as the backup, which would have been crazy. But when I was looking at their cap situation, I'm like, maybe they're just going to do that. But I think, at the end of the day, it made sense to go out and get somebody, even if it wasn't Tyrod Taylor. They had to get someone who's throwing a pass in an NFL game.
Can you imagine that?
You read stories on, Trubisky, Allen, and they all like mention like Davis Webb specifically. So obviously, he did bring something to them. But I'm excited for more preseason Davis Webb takes. Thought those were things of the past. Looking ahead, Nick Gates and Shane Lemieux, but I don't. Shane Lemieux's injury wasn't as gruesome as Nick Gates. Nick Gates, if you look at what he was before he got hurt, he'd still be the second best offensive lineman on this team right now. I think he'd be better than Glowinski, definitely better than Feliciano. But that injury is gruesome now. It seems like they're keeping him, which I think is, partly due to the injury settlement stuff with it. Like, have you heard anything? Like, is there any chance he is at least active as a backup when week 1 kicks off?
You guys are the ones with the Nick Gates hookup. I think you guys are the ones of I think he did a press conference at the end of the year, but you guys had like the exclusive where he's telling you what the compartment syndrome and all these different things. I'm like taking notes watching that interview. Now I know from talking to people late last season, like towards the end of the year, there wasn't a lot of optimism that he'd be ready to go this coming season. Now again, that's in like say December. A lot can change over 8 months. I'm not gonna sit there and say, oh, he's out for the year. So hopefully no one aggregates that part. But that was the feeling. Like it was such a gruesome injury. He had so many surgeries. There was so much damage in that leg that it's almost one of those deals where like, hey, thank God you can walk again. It was pretty bad there for a while. But he's clearly, he's posted pictures. He's clearly back in like the rehab mode, which is a good step forward. I think if you want to look at a model, it's sort of like the Richie Soybert, where it was like, I think it took like a full year. And then the next year he was finally able to get back and he was just like a jumbo tight end. Even it's really easing him back in. Again, I'm not saying they're the same injuries, but that's sort of what I would think would probably be the ideal path for Gates. Again, who knows? Maybe he'll be a medical marvel and he'll be ready to go week 1. Obviously they don't seem to be banking on that. So yeah, keeping him, yeah, there is the injury protection. I think it's just sort of, it'd be kind of a grimy move to cut the guy after he, literally had his leg blown up, playing for you. He's been a captain, he's been a great guy. I thought the way to handle it probably was like, do something where you can lower his cap hit this year and extend him. So you make sure he gets all his money, but that might've been maybe that's something that's up their sleeve as the cap continues to stay tight here. But I don't think he factors into the 2022 plans. If he does, great. It's a bonus. I don't see it. Lemieux, I think when it first happened, when he first had to get the surgery, it was kind of like, like this could be a career threatening type injury. Those, patellar injuries are pretty gruesome and pretty serious. But again, as the season went on, I had heard more optimism. Like, I think he'll be back. Can't guarantee it as we sit here in March, but I think he'll be back. So I think he's in that mix. I think it's gonna be like him and Bredesen and Gano, however you pronounce it, Gono, at left guard. I'm sure they'll draft the guy in the mid rounds. That'll just kind of be a hodgepodge. We'll throw bodies at that position. I think Lemieux will be in that. I think if I had the handicap day, maybe he's the favorite. Because I don't think that injury is something that's gonna linger into 2022.
As my background falls off the back. All right. I want to finish off with just some Judge Gettleman stuff, but is there anything else you want to hit on, Justin?
No, I'm actually interested to hear about Judge Gettleman.
Well, so it starts off well, obviously. I think Judge was overhyped after 2020, but the hype was deserved. It was deserved to be hyped around it, and then it all falls apart. In 2021, the firing of Garrett. A very tumultuous season, and they fired Garrett, and Daniel Jones is literally injured on the second play with the new offensive coordinator, which is like that couldn't have you couldn't have dreamed up a nightmare as bad as that. What was the dynamic with him and Gettleman? Because it seemed like they were getting some stuff done. Like if you look at the last two off seasons, maybe not perfect, but you feel good really about the 2020 draft. Bradberry and Blake Martinez were good signings. The Leonard Williams, that was kind of prejudged, and Gettleman was backed into a corner there.
Right.
Even Galladay, as much as it didn't work out this year, like you understand it, and they trade back at it. Like what ended up was the fallout between those two? Because you guys reported that they were not on the same page on a lot of things.
Yeah, I mean, it's like any relationship. Obviously, you come in day one, everything's great. Hey, just got hired. It's the honeymoon phase. That happens with every regime. And so I think just progressively over time, they just weren't on the same page. And it takes. I don't know if there's like one moment. I think it's just a gradual sort of erosion of the relationship, the trust, the communication, all of that, and it just kept kind of getting worse. Like you said, that first draft, it was kind of a weird draft too. You had COVID. They did the same thing this regime was doing. We kind of went to familiar guys, like obviously. Dave knew Bradberry, Patrick Graham knew Blake Martinez. They were getting guys they knew. Those are, their two best free agent signings. They tried to branch out last year, even though they did the big, kind of sleepover parties with Kenny Galladay. It still didn't exactly work out. But yeah, like I think it was just, I think in some ways philosophically they were aligned, which is kind of like a strike against Judge, that he was kind of like that caveman attitude to punt and field position and that type of stuff. But I think in terms of like how to run the organization, they had very different views. I mean, Judge is a big time type A personality, like wants to get things done yesterday. I don't know. I feel Gettleman just feels like one of those guys who was good in the room with the, we make the joke, but the Wii remote, watching film, maybe on the road back in his day scouting. He was not an executive who really led the franchise and had his hands on everything. So I think just as things start going bad, those cracks really widened. Again, like everyone always wants examples of these. It's kind of hard to nail them down. I don't know if it was on you guys' podcast, but the one that really jumped out was Ifedi Odenigbo, that signing. It's like it just didn't make sense. Like he didn't fit their defense at all. But Dave or the pro personnel department, whoever's like, well, this guy had 7.5 sacks a couple years ago. Like we need a pass rusher. Let's just sign him. And it was just like, okay, that sounds great on paper. And then you get to training camp and like they don't know where to put him. He's like a third stringer. And like that's just that's a small example, but that's like a microcosm of a lot of the things. Like, okay, like we got to cut Kevin Zeitler for cap space. Like, okay, well, what's the plan to like shore up the O-line? And there really wasn't one. And like the draft moving back, that's clearly Judge influence. We have plenty of track record, but that's not Dave Gettleman's MO. And Judge is coming from New England, where that's a big piece. So like it was always just sort of a tug of war of like kind of who had the power and you just kind of go on and on. It's like examples like that there's small examples in the moment, but they add up. And by the end, the relationship had just like totally deteriorated.
Odenigbo was definitely a small one, but I think, like you said, very glaring. Because we do our free agent videos now, and I remember coming away from that, like hand in the dirt, BJ Hill type, and they were like, "No, he's going to play edge." I'm like, "No, like he's going to be hand in the dirt." Like I was like, he's more likely to play inside than he is at stand up edge. They put him on there, and a team that had essentially no edge production outside of Azeez Ojulari cut this guy in camp. Like that's
right.
how bad of a fit it was. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. I think. I think it was kind of like it was really compelling, the end of Judge, because like you said, it seemed like he was locked up, and then the 11-minute rant and then not, and he was promised time. Like, the organization promised him like, no, we're not going to pull the plug on this after 2 years. And they said, I think the right decision, but also, screwed Judge over a little bit.
Yeah. I think if he could go back and, the hands of time, he would have made a much more impassioned plea, I think, after the 2020 season to say like, this isn't working. Like we need to get, Nick Caserio would have been available at the time, Monty Osborne, one of these New England guys. And instead, I think ownership wanted to look at it like, hey, we almost made the playoffs, 6-10, like we're on the right path. Why would we change anything? So I think that's probably, if there's anything he probably regrets, and this is just my, speculation on it, is that he probably should have been a little more forceful, letting them know at that point things aren't working. Because I think, as kind of reported, communication in that building isn't always the best. I think there was an assumption like, oh, everything must be great. We won, 5 out of our last 8. We were in the playoff, race. So I think that's probably, of all of his regrets, that's probably the biggest, because I think if he gets his guy in here last year, things go a little differently. He survives, and at least, he's into year 3 with a chance to really like kind of leave his imprint. Instead, it just blew up so fast, and just the wheels came off so fast that it just like, boom, it was just over, and like you said, like in a 3-week window, it just went, totally off the rails.
Well, that's an interview. That's how we end our interviews now. We appreciate you. Tony Award winner. Make sure to, support, Kadarius Toney Fridays, honestly, for as bad as this season we're pretty. Actually, you know what? I'm not ending it. What's it like a Kadarius Toney press conference? Because to me, it seems like, man, I better get this question right or else he's just going to literally laugh in my face.
Yeah, it is. It is uncomfortable. Like, you can like basically ask.
That's why I love it.
You can ask like Logan Ryan. You can ask like Devontae Booker, like any personality, anything, and they're just gonna like Logan's not a good example because he give like a really thoughtful long answer, but like just some run of the mill guy you could ask a question, they'll just mumble out some cliche like that. You can't put it on autopilot with Tony. You have to be prepared for like the icy glare and like 13-second pause and then him just laughing. So it's one of those things where like sometimes if I don't have a question, you just ask a question to fill the air and like keep it moving. I don't really do that with him because it's not worth the awkward interaction. If I don't have something I need to ask him, I just sit it out because it definitely is awkward.
You can't be playful. Like I remember Art asked him like, "Hey, you guys are playing the Falcons, Kyle Pitts, like any scout, like just trying like your buddy's like, nah, like just
no.
This Daryl Slater kept on trying. I mean, just kept on trying, man. It's like you're just not going to win with this guy. But
he's by far the most interesting interview subject, and I haven't even been in the locker room yet, so that'll be really curious when it's like you have to like go over and approach him and see how it goes. At least when he came to the podium, he like knew he had to speak, even though he didn't always want to or really engage in it.
Back?
But that's the hope, that's the plan. I don't know if it's gonna be exactly like it used to be, but where it is, like the NFL said, COVID's over, so we're gonna be getting back to some degree to locker room access. So yeah, that'll be interesting.
I'm just looking forward to Tony. I mean, I literally would just sit there on Fridays, like 45 minutes and just refresh Giants.com. Like, come on, give me the Tony because it is just gold every time.
Well, the injuries were a killer thing. We lost him for like 4 or 5 weeks where he was MIA. So you guys gypped of a lot of entertainment value on Fridays and Sundays.
Yeah, they started editing some stuff. Like I remember there was one Rob Sale interview. It's like, man, I would have loved to hear the tone of this, but they edited every single thing out about Matt Parrott. But you know what? That's why you guys get that's why people got to follow Dan Duggan because the Giants can't edit anything else. We appreciate you coming on as always.
All right, so now you got to send me a shelf to put the trophy on, and we'll be good to go.
I can next time I'm up there. We have an office near where you. I guess I can't say where you live, but
right
in the city that you live,
address.
I'll go to a thrift store and I'll haul a shelf up to whatever. I won't even use the elevator.
Here, look, we have
Sounds
extra
good.
shelves. I will show. We have extra shelves.
Oh my goodness, this is too good to be true.
Oh, we've got the real deal Manhattan office now. I mean, I haven't seen it yet, but it's supposedly it's pretty real deal. So.
All right, sounds good, fellas.
All right, good as always.
All right, thank you to award-winning journalist from The Athletic, Dan Duggan, for coming on the show. And we got to talk about a couple more things before we get out of here. And one of those things being SeatGeek. Today's episode is sponsored by SeatGeek. Live events are back, which means you can get $20 off tickets at SeatGeek with promo code Giants. If you don't know what SeatGeek is, they're a ticketing app that makes buying tickets super simple. We've got the app on our phones, and I am actually buying tickets this week to the NASCAR race in Charlotte. I don't think it's called the Coca-Cola 600 anymore, but that's what it used to be called, Charlotte Motor Speedway.
I'm the same way with NASCAR, where it's like I still call the firecracker. It's the Pepsi 400, Yeah,
at Daytona in July. Yes, so obviously, so that's what I'm doing using SeatGeek this week. And I'm using promo code Giants at checkout, which I'll tell you what, that's probably going to cover my fees, which that is honestly great. It's honestly fantastic. Whether it's football, concerts, basketball, baseball, NASCAR, or more, SeatGeek puts tickets from all over the web in one place, and it makes buying simple. I'm going to pick a seat or a couple seats where it has a green deal. That means it's a good deal, and I'm getting the tickets for cheap. So what I want you to do is use code Giants for $20 off tickets at SeatGeek. That's $20 off your first purchase with promo code Giants. Make sure you click the link in the description to download the app. Thank you to SeatGeek.
Oh, word, SeatGeek. How about you send me to an Orlando Magic game? How about that, SeatGeek? Before I get real pissed off at you. Go use SeatGeek, promo code Giants, $20 off. All right, that's an episode. We'll be back on Friday. Assuming there'll be some more free agents signings to round up, which if there is, that's what we'll do. If not, maybe we'll do our last mailbag until May. You know, like
wow.
Like if we don't do one this Friday, it's our last free episode where we don't have a set what we're going to talk about until mid-May, because Tuesday is Nick Falato. The Friday after that is the start of draft month, and we are off and rolling, baby. All right, we appreciate you guys. Any last words, Justin?
Have a great day.
Have a great day. We'll see you guys on Friday. Appreciate you. Enjoy your week. Until then, let's go Big Blue.